Am I the a-hole for walking out of the house after my stepmother called me a mistake and my dad said nothing? I, 28F, am the oldest of two kids from my dad's first marriage. My dad, 55M, divorced my mom when I was about 15. And while we didn't have the best relationship after, I've tried to keep things cordial with him. Fast forward to 5 years ago, he remarried a woman, Catherine, 45F, who I've never really clicked with. She and I have always had a strained relationship, but I've kept my distance and tried to be polite. The incident happened during a family dinner at my dad's house last night. It was a gathering to celebrate my younger brother's, 23M, graduation, and everything was supposed to be light and fun. But things took a pretty bad turn. To give some context, Catherine has always made me feel like an outsider. She's been openly critical of my relationship with my dad and has constantly thrown passive-aggressive comments my way, which I've usually let slide because I don't want to cause drama, especially with my dad. During dinner, Catherine started talking about how my brother was doing well in life, and out of nowhere, she said, "It's a miracle you turned out okay, considering your family situation." I'm sure you can guess where this was going. She continued, "You know, you were a mistake, and your dad's life only really started when he met me." Now, this stung, but I've heard worse from her before. I've put up with a lot, but in that moment, something snapped. I turned to my dad, expecting him to say anything, something to defend me, at least acknowledge how hurtful that was. But he didn't say a word, not even a hint of disapproval. He just sat there, silently, and let her talk. I was already on edge, and this was just the last straw. I don't know if it was because I was tired of being treated like I don't belong in my own family, or if it was just the lack of support from my dad, but I got up, grabbed my coat, and walked out of the house without saying anything. I didn't feel like I could stay in that environment anymore, where not only my stepmother insults me, but my dad couldn't stand up for me. I've been thinking a lot about everything that happened, and part of me feels like I should have just confronted Catherine right there instead of walking out. But honestly, after all the years of being treated like an outsider, I just couldn't take it anymore. Catherine's comments were the kind of thing you don't just shrug off. She's called me things like a disappointment and difficult before, but this felt different. She crossed a line. I tried to stay calm, but in the moment, all I could think was, why is my dad letting this happen? I've tried talking to my dad about it before. He always says that he doesn't want to get involved in petty arguments between me and Catherine. I get that he doesn't want to pick sides, but I've never asked him to. I've never expected him to choose me over her. All I wanted was for him to show some basic empathy and support when I'm being outright disrespected. But he never does. He never says anything when Catherine makes her snide comments, and it's starting to feel like he doesn't care enough to do anything about it. I ended up texting my dad after I left. I said something like, "I don't know why you're letting her treat me like this, but I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. I deserve more than this." He didn't respond until morning, and when he did, he said that I was being dramatic and that I should have talked to him instead of leaving. He mentioned that he didn't want me making a scene and ruining the evening for everyone else. He didn't address what Catherine said, just that I should have handled it better. My brother has been texting me too, saying that he gets why I was upset, but that I should have stayed for his sake. He says it wasn't the right time to cause tension and that the family has already been through enough. Honestly, I get where he's coming from, but at the same time, it's not like this is the first time Catherine has hurt me. This has been years of pent-up frustration. The more I think about it, the more frustrated I get. I don't know if it's because of how emotionally drained I am or if it's just that I've been holding this all in for so long. But I really don't know how much longer I can keep pretending everything is fine when it's clearly not. That I was raised by my mom, and while things weren't perfect, I always knew she loved me. I've never felt like I had to fight for my place in her life. But with my dad, it's always been different. Ever since he remarried, I've felt like I've been fighting for his attention and approval, and it's been exhausting. The fact that he's been so passive when it comes to Catherine's behavior makes me question whether I'll ever be able to get back to a place where I feel like I matter to him in the same way I once did. What makes this even harder is that I've tried. I've tried to have mature conversations with my dad about how his marriage to Catherine is affecting me, but he always brushes it off. He insists that it's just a phase and that eventually I'll get over it. But it's not a phase. It's been 5 years, and things haven't gotten better. They've gotten worse. Catherine continues to undermine me, and my dad either says nothing or defends her. I'm left with no choice but to distance myself, and it feels like he doesn't care that it's tearing me apart. And then there's my brother. I know he's caught in the middle, and I hate that I've made him feel like he has to choose sides. But I don't know how to explain to him that this isn't about trying to ruin the family dynamic. It's about being treated with respect. I feel like if I stay quiet, if I just let Catherine get away with her constant digs, it will send the message that it's okay to treat me that way. And I can't keep doing that. But what's also eating at me is this nagging feeling that maybe I did overreact. Maybe walking out wasn't the right move, especially with my brother's graduation being such an important event. I know it wasn't the best time, but I also don't think it was the right time for Catherine to make another cruel comment. If my dad couldn't defend me, then maybe I should have found another way to deal with it. But I just felt like I had nothing left to give. I've talked to some of my friends about this, and they all say the same thing. You're not in the wrong for standing up for yourself. But part of me still feels like I could have handled it better. Should I have stayed? Should I have told Catherine exactly how I felt right there instead of walking away? I've been thinking about sending a message to my dad, explaining my feelings again, but it feels like I've said everything already, and he just isn't listening. The other issue is that now I feel like I've made my brother's life harder. He and I haven't had the closest relationship, but we've always supported each other. Now I feel like I've put him in a position where he has to pick between me and the rest of the family. I didn't want that. I wanted him to enjoy his graduation without having to worry about me and my issues with Catherine, but I can't just ignore how things are affecting me anymore. I think what hurts the most is that I always thought that my dad and I would eventually get to a better place. But now, I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. I don't know if I can keep pretending everything's fine when I'm being emotionally drained by Catherine's behavior and my dad's indifference. As time went on, I found myself replaying the whole situation in my head over and over. I couldn't stop thinking about how everything escalated. It wasn't just the comment from Catherine. It was everything leading up to that point. The years of passive-aggressive remarks, the countless times I had tried to reach out to my dad and gotten nothing in return. But it felt like this one moment, this one comment, was the tipping point. I know I could have handled things differently. I could have stayed, called Catherine out on her behavior in front of everyone, and forced my dad to take a stand. But in the moment, I felt too hurt and betrayed to do anything other than walk away. It wasn't just about what she said. It was the complete lack of support from my dad. If he'd said something, anything, I might have stayed. But he didn't. He didn't even look at me. It felt like he wasn't even willing to acknowledge how deeply I was hurt. What made everything more confusing was that I tried so many times in the past to address the situation calmly. I'd written my dad long letters, tried to have honest conversations, but nothing ever changed. He always told me to move on and to accept Catherine, even when her behavior became more and more toxic. At some point, I stopped trying to understand why he wasn't standing up for me. It was clear that he prioritized keeping the peace with her over my feelings. But what hurt the most was the complete lack of empathy, not just from Catherine, but from my dad. He didn't even acknowledge the pain I was feeling, and that made it feel like my feelings didn't matter. He couldn't even bring himself to say, "I understand why you're upset," or "that wasn't okay." Instead, he made it about how I was the one causing problems by walking out. After everything that happened, I felt like I was being asked to apologize for simply standing up for myself. I was told that walking out wasn't the right way to handle things. And maybe they were right in the sense that it wasn't the most mature way to address the issue. But I was angry and hurt, and I couldn't pretend to be okay when I wasn't. That I didn't want to be dramatic, but I didn't feel like I had a choice anymore. I couldn't continue to let myself be treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. And the fact that my dad didn't stand up for me made me feel like I was invisible to him. I wasn't asking him to choose me over Catherine. I was just asking him to stand up for what was right, to show me that I mattered. But I also knew that this situation wasn't just about me. It was about Catherine, about my dad, and about the strained relationship I now had with both of them. I didn't want to hurt my brother, but I couldn't ignore the fact that this was affecting me, too. I had to choose myself in that moment because no one else was going to do it for me. Eventually, after a few more days of no contact, I ended up calling my dad. The conversation was short but heated. I told him that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I told him how I felt disrespected and how hurt I was that he hadn't stood up for me. He apologized, but it felt empty. He said he didn't know what to do and that he never wanted to upset me. But that didn't make up for the years of silence. It didn't make up for the years of me feeling overlooked and dismissed. In the end, I realized that the resolution wasn't going to come easily. I wasn't going to get the support I needed from my dad overnight, and I wasn't going to fix the rift with Catherine just by walking away. It would take time, and maybe it would never get better. But I was starting to accept that I couldn't keep sacrificing my own well-being just to maintain the peace. Over the following weeks, the tension in my family only seemed to grow. My dad and I barely talked, and when we did, it was mostly about surface-level things, like how work was going or how the weather had been. I couldn't bring myself to open up to him again. Not yet. Every time I tried to have a real conversation, I felt like he was either distracted or just didn't want to engage with what I was saying. Meanwhile, Catherine didn't reach out to me at all. Not that I expected her to, but it still stung. She never took any accountability for what she said. I knew that was how she operated, always playing the victim, always shifting the blame. But it still hurt that she hadn't even attempted to apologize. I guess, deep down, I wasn't expecting much from her, but I still held out a small hope that she might realize how damaging her words were. That wasn't going to happen. I kept thinking about my brother, and I started to feel guilty for dragging him into this. Even though he understood why I was upset, I could tell it was weighing on him. He started distancing himself, probably to avoid the conflict that had been created between me and the rest of the family. I didn't blame him for it. This whole situation had put him in the middle, and that wasn't fair to him. One evening, a couple of weeks after everything had gone down, my brother called me. He asked if we could meet up for coffee. When we sat down, he was the first to speak. "I get why you were upset," he said, his voice quiet. "But I'm worried that this whole thing is tearing us apart. I don't want to lose you as my sister, but I also don't want to lose Dad." I didn't know what to say at first. I had so many emotions running through me that I was just numb. I finally replied, "I'm not trying to tear anything apart, but I'm also not going to keep pretending that everything's okay when it's not. I've tried for years to get Dad to see what's going on, but he just doesn't care. He lets her say whatever she wants, and I'm supposed to just accept it." "I know," he said, nodding, "but I think you need to talk to him again. Maybe he doesn't realize how much this is hurting you. You know Dad. He's not the best at seeing things from other people's perspective." I sighed, feeling the weight of his words. My brother was right, of course. My dad had always been oblivious to things that weren't directly in his face. He couldn't see how deeply this was affecting me because he had never experienced it himself, and maybe he didn't know how to fix it, or maybe he just didn't want to. But I had to at least try again. For the sake of my relationship with my dad, and for my own peace of mind, I couldn't leave it unresolved forever. A few days later, I called my dad. The conversation was awkward at first. I didn't know where to begin, but eventually, I just blurted it out. "Dad, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep pretending I'm okay with how things are between us. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear him breathing, like he was trying to figure out what to say. I don't know what you want from me, but I'm sorry. I didn't realize how much this was hurting you. I've been so focused on keeping the peace that I didn't notice you were getting pushed aside. I didn't know how to respond. Part of me wanted to hear him say that he was going to change, that he would start standing up for me. But another part of me was just glad to hear that he was finally acknowledging how I felt. It wasn't the grand apology I'd hoped for, but it was something. I just need you to know that I can't keep pretending like everything's fine, I said, my voice shaking a little. I don't expect you to choose between me and Catherine, but I need you to see how much this is affecting me. I can't be in a relationship with you where you can't even stand up for me when I need it. He was quiet for a moment, then said, I understand. I'll try harder, I promise. It wasn't the end-all be-all resolution I had hoped for, but it was a start. I felt like I had been heard, at least, and that gave me some relief. The emotional burden that had been weighing on me for so long didn't vanish overnight, but this was a step in the right direction. As for Catherine, nothing really changed. She still didn't reach out, and I don't know if she ever will. I stopped waiting for her apology because I realized that I couldn't control how she acted, and honestly, I didn't want to keep putting myself in situations where I hoped she would change. I would continue to set boundaries, but I wasn't going to waste energy on someone who would never truly value me. After all of this, I realized that sometimes the only way to get someone's attention is to show them that you're willing to walk away. I wasn't expecting everything to be fixed overnight, and I didn't get the apology I was hoping for, but the conversation with my dad gave me a little bit of hope. At least now, I knew that he was aware of how much I was hurting. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. The hardest part, though, was accepting that things weren't going to change immediately. My dad's actions in the future would show whether he truly meant his apology, and I wasn't going to let myself be dragged down by unrealistic expectations. I would continue to set boundaries with Catherine, and I would prioritize my own mental health, even if that meant distancing myself from certain parts of my family. I still love my dad. I still want a relationship with him, but it couldn't be at the cost of my self-respect. I realized that sometimes you have to choose yourself over the people you love, even if it hurts. And that's exactly what I did at AS for my brother. I didn't want to let our relationship become strained because of all this. We talked about it, and I reassured him that I wasn't trying to tear our family apart. I just wanted to be treated with respect, and I wanted our family to be able to have honest, open conversations without sweeping things under the rug. Things aren't perfect, but I think they're better. I'm no longer holding on to the hope that everyone will change for me. Instead, I've learned to set the boundaries I need and to focus on my own well-being. Sometimes, standing up for yourself is the hardest thing you can do, but it's also the most important. And while I may never get the closure I hoped for, I know I did what I needed to do for myself. I feel like I stood up for myself in the best way I knew how, but now I'm wondering if I handled it wrong. Was I too dramatic by walking out? Should I have stayed and confronted Catherine in front of everyone instead? I didn't want to create more tension, especially with my brother's graduation going on, but I couldn't pretend to be fine when I wasn't. So, Reddit, am I the a-hole for walking out in that situation? What do you think I should have done differently? Would love to hear opinions on this. If you've ever dealt with family drama or struggled to stand up for yourself in tough situations, this story might hit close to home. Was the decision to walk away justified, or did it only make things worse? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more personal stories like this one.